Thank you very much, and it's of course a pleasure to be here. I will try to quickly wean you off nice pictures and so on down to the normal boring slides, so we're going to do that. But I would like to start by saying that we have had the pleasure of listening to 4 eminent scientists, and just to emphasize, we need more eminent scientists, but that is a necessary, not sufficient requirement. So let's start a little bit by just trying to get a kind of definitional understanding of these things, and very simplistically understanding the difference between research and innovation. And actually I noticed that they are going the wrong way on the slide for some reason. That's just gives us a track there. So research is actually the conversion of money to knowledge. Okay? So that's what it's all about. We do these things to learn more. And if I wanted to distinguish this in a very simplistic and somewhat unfair way, I would say that the role of a scientist is frequently to discover that which already exists. We just didn't know that it existed. Right? Whereas if you want to look at an engineer, also an important character, the role is to create something that didn't exist before. There wasn't a bridge, now there is a bridge in those areas. So innovation is the ability to take this knowledge and turn it into money, if you are in the world of making money, or turn it into some other value if you are in the non-monetary making world. And it's important that we link these things, because obviously doing research by definition costs money, and that money needs to come from somewhere. And that money comes frequently by funding by either industry or by government. So we need to somehow take the responsibility to generate that money back. And on the whole, Australia is, generally speaking, excellent at research. We are not equally excellent at innovation. And if you look at all the general linkings in the world, we do suffer from that. And part of that is due to the fact that we have the highest amount of undirected research funding among the OECD world. But we also are improving. In the latest version of Nature, a pretty renowned journal in this field, Australia comes among the nations that are improving its research and activities among the highest in the world. So, how do we generate this type of money? You know, what is it we want as an economy, as a country? Well, in very simple terms, we want to be able to generate enough prosperity so that we can pay for all the things we want. We want to have good pension systems, good health care, good infrastructure. All of that costs money. And then money needs to come from somewhere. And it comes from our ability to generate wealth in industry, things that we can sell around the world. And obviously that means we need to be able to produce things that nobody else can produce. It's very important. You know, if somebody else can produce it, it's highly likely that they can produce it cheaper, and that we will not be able to sell it. So we need to have this ability to develop new things that nobody else can do, and turn that into the wealth that we can use for other things. And that's on the whole, it's about economic complexity. And economic complexity is the ability to produce things that nobody else can produce and sell it to the rest of the world. That explains about 70% of the prosperity of any country. Then we have to do a few other things. We have to have, there's an issue about density. So the closer things are to each other, the more likely they're going to kind of benefit each other, spin off each other into generating that wealth. And Australia, of course, has an issue, generally speaking, as a country being very large. Luckily enough, we are one of the most, if not the most urbanized country in the world, so we do provide a lot of density. And you see the benefit of this density by looking at the Waite campus. All these people located together from different institutes, working together, generates that benefit. So we need that. And we need to be able to work together. It's another problem in Australia. Collaboration is too low. We need to work together. The enemy is not the guy on the other side of the street that does approximately what I do. The enemy is the guy who sits across the world trying to take my business away from me. So it's very important that we collaborate around these things. Collaboration is critical. And then we need to have the willingness to take risk, to start new ventures, to do things. One of the things we want is people wandering in and out of the research community and the business community. We want our researchers to take the risk, start up companies, Sometimes they fail, sometimes they succeed. Whatever the outcome is a tick in the box, it has given learnings and insight, and then they can wander back into the academic community and contribute that experience and research activities that they do. So we need that willingness both ways. And we want our industry to understand the importance of research and what research can contribute to their innovation activities. And then we need to be access to global value chains. We need to sell our things. We need to have customers that helps us distribute it across the world. It is very difficult today to be the end guy who makes everything into a product. You need suppliers into it, and you may be suppliers to others. So we need to be part of those chains. And then, of course, we need to operate in an environment where we have predictable environments to operate. And that is government's role. Government's role is to provide an environment which is predictable. It isn't stable, but it is predictable. And we do have an occasional challenge in Australia there, where we tend to flip-flop about every third year, which is not good, because companies need about 10 years to do these things. So, I've more or less said all these things. The other things you need in this economic complexity environment is 5 resources to put together. You need money. Absolutely clearly, either money you generate yourself or you get from somewhere as a grant or as a loan or some investments that you have. You need some physical things. You need good facilities, good equipment. You need anything that you have, raw materials. You need fantastic relationships. You need, good relationship with customers, good relationship with suppliers, good relationship with key stakeholders, the community you operate in, and so on. You need processes, you need systems, you need brands, and you need competent people. Luckily, we have a lot of those things, so we're able to do this if we do it right. This you're not supposed to be able to read, okay? That's very important. So the whole issue here is to say that we need to understand that we need to cover a whole spectrum. So we need to go from what is on the left, which is the coming up with a new idea, verifying it. This is where research lives. This is where we develop the new insight. And at the end of the day over here, we can develop a new product, this wonderful beer that we can have on an industrial scale where we produce, 10,000 bottles of beer per hour that we sell around the world. That's roughly what we want to do. But going from left to right is a very long journey. On average, it takes about 7 years from the type of point when you have a concept of the lab bench working until you have an industrial output. And in that process, you need to do a lot of things frequently forgotten. You need to develop the machinery that's going to do these things. Okay? It's not going to happen automatically. You need to develop all those things that enables the industry to operate. You need to have your customers. You need to have all of these things. And what we tend to find is that there is a gap here, which is a reasonable problem. And that is exactly in moving from working issue on my lab bench into an industrial scale operation. And let me take you a simplistic example. If you have supercritical water, that means water under very high pressure, under very high temperature, you can put in cellulose in it, And in that cellulose, it rips that pieces of tree. You rip that apart into its constituent chemical components, which is great, which means you can do things out of it. Now, you can set up such a little thing on the lab bench, about this big, and you can make it quite easily, and you generate the output. Now you're going to go industrial, because you're going to use this to produce, biofuels. So you now need to produce 50,000 tons of biofuel a week. Now, in so doing, if you do the same sphere, you will need to have a diameter of something like 8 to 12 meters, under the same pressure and with the same temperature. Here comes the trick question. What material can you make that out of? The answer is you cannot make it out of the same material that you use to make the lab ones, because the pressure per surface area is so high that that sphere will not hold together. It will blow apart. So these are the type of issues that have to be addressed in things about scale-up that we must not forget. And that is why we have this problem of moving to all those wonderful insights we gain here into the industrial activities over there, which is where the money is generated back. So, in the food and agri sector, and again, you shouldn't be able to read this. It's just because I can give you copies of this afterwards if you want them and download them, so you can read and remember what I said by reading what's on the slide. The point here is that as we heard before, we have great opportunities in this country in food and agriculture. At the moment, Australia, with a population of give or take 23 million people, can produce food for around 60 million people. That's a good thing, but it ain't enough, as we heard about these type of areas. We need much, much more. And not only do we need much more, we need to get money on a high level for what we do, so we can keep investing in doing this and in getting the prosperity. And that means we need to develop our food and our agriculture to the level where it produces more of what it does today, as well as producing more new things in ways that we haven't produced before. And that means we need to improve what is known as two different dimensions of productivity. One is more for less, and the other one is smarter things in smarter ways to doing that. And that means we need to produce, instead of a commodity wine that we sell for $1 per liter, we need to produce a luxury wine that people are willing to pay $500 for a liter for, with a marginally higher production cost. That is fundamentally important, because that part of that wine industry will then generate a wealth that enables a flow through a society in ways we otherwise cannot generate that wealth. So we need to do both things, both larger volumes, but also higher value. And the issues around agriculture and food in that area are critical. And that means that the companies going to do these things need to have a strategy that allows them to not have to compete on price. We call it non-price-based competition. And you can only do that if you're the only guy in town, right? And that means that you have to produce things that nobody else can produce. And that means either using things like science, patents and issues that follows from that, or the ability to have a good brand and issues like that. There are famous luxury producers, normally of French origin, that make things like handbags, right? And if you go and buy one of those handbags, it will cost you, give or take, $10,000 for a handbag. I'm not sure how many of you have one of those, but it's one of these. The production cost of that is high because they have extremely high quality, use extremely high raw material, but it's nowhere near $10,000. So that means that your margins accrue from that handbag based on the fact that it has a really good brand. And the development of that brand is critical. So there are more than technological and scientific bases on which you can make a profitable business. And we need to use all of those areas. So, I'm not going to talk too much about that. In practice, okay, it means on the agricultural side that we have to produce the right things, whatever they may be. If they may be more nutritious grains, grains that are smarter to use in production, whatever it may be. We need to do the right things with the highest possible productivity improvement. That means we need to use drones, we need to use all the ability to complement the nutrition in the land, all the things we've heard about today in order to do that. And we need to use all this principle of smart thinking of how to make this happen with the lowest input cost. And then we need to innovate also on the agricultural things by producing smarter things in smarter ways. Very, very critical. And then on the food side, we need to produce science-based food. These are things like gluten-free or lactose-free or whatever it may be in those areas. It may be things like additional nutritions. That means it's easier for us to grow or lose weight or whatever it may be. Luxury foods, which I spoke about, and don't forget things like ethnic food. There is a dramatic demand in things like halal food, which is really an opportunity for us with a relatively straightforward process to extract much more value out of what we do. So, all in all, I think it's not going away. We have to leave behind the commodity scenario. And let me try to explain why it's important not to think commodity. And I'll try to do it, it's something called the poverty trap of nations, but I want to explain it in a way which is more what we can explain to ourselves. So think of it the following way. Who would you rather be? The person that makes enough money to travel to the really luxurious resort where you can sit at the poolside, being served the food that you love and the daiquiri made for you whenever you want it by somebody. Or that somebody who works there serving the daiquiri to you, who can never afford to take a holiday, who can never afford to go to enjoy those resort services and opportunities. And the only way we can avoid the poverty trap is by getting out of the commodity mindset. It is not how much wheat you make, it is how much you can sell the wheat you make for. And we have to think value, not volume. And for those of you interested in science, I will finish with a personal reflection of the ladder of science. The first issue in science is to understand maths, be it in terms of statistics or be it in terms of mathematics. Mathematics is the language of physics. So physics is the simple science, as one of the physicists once said. Physics is the language of chemistry, and chemistry is the language of biology. So biology is the most complex of sciences, has the most opportunities, the most variety, and hence it's why the laws that we understand at the beginning get diluted as they migrate up and generate a larger variety of behaviors that we can enjoy studying, and they we can then convert into interesting things that other people will pay a lot of money for, so that you can all live a really good life. Thank you.